Hey guys, it's me today. I'm here with a guide to Karen and McManus. I haven't done a guide to video in a while, but that's because I'm awful at reading all these backlists, and I want to be able to, discuss every book this author has put out so far. So here I am. I think the last one I did was in 2020, not even 2021. Let me just quickly check my notes. Yes, my last one was in 2020. I apologize, it's been a while. If you've been around on this channel, you know that in 2021 I had an obsession with Karen McManus. I binge read all of her books, so I'm gonna talk about them with you because I read her most recent release in January, so I got time to talk about it. I'll first be going down every single book that she has put out already in publication order, my thoughts on them, little synopsis, all of that, and then I will also discuss books that are on a Goodreads right now that she has announced that are coming. So yeah, let's talk about things. Okay, so the first book that Karen M. McManus brought out is One of Us is Lying, which I think is also her most popular book. And basically in this book, 5 teens enter detention, 4 leave, 1 dies in the middle of it, and this person has this gossip blog. Turns out that this guy was gonna publish this big news story about these 4 other people, revealing their biggest secrets a couple of days after detention, and therefore the police is kind of on the case well, nobody else was in detention at this place and needed to have happened at this place. And the fact that they all seem to have a motive now, they're all 4 basically framed for it in a way. They think that they did it, but they don't have proof, and then we spent the entire book trying to find proof. Well, the 4 of them are trying to find proof against who actually did it because they know neither of them did it. And yeah, that was a shit explanation, but I give this 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't really like this book. I'm glad this wasn't the first one that I've read by Karen McManus, because I feel like I wouldn't have continued on with her book, because the final reveal in this book is just extremely problematic, which is something I have heard a lot before going into this book, because it makes mental health a plot twist, which isn't a great thing to do at all, and I hated it. I also just feel like the characters were all very much stereotypes, which again comes in with the issue that there is a character of color and a gay character as well. So, that also doesn't really help with the problematicness of the reveal, knowing that there are some stereotypes in this book. And I feel might not be the most problematic stereotypes, but it's just stereotypes we've seen over and over again. And I feel the way those characters developed is also very much in the typical way that these stereotypes do, so it didn't really feel very unique either. I do think there were some interesting twists and ideas in this book, and it is very quick and fun to read, which is a very that's on brand for Karen McManus. They're fun and quick reads, but I wasn't as engaged in this book as I have been with all of the other books, so that's also why this was a 3 out of 5 stars. This is also has been turned into a TV show by Peacock, I believe, which I started but I haven't finished. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I'm waiting to actually finish it because I'm curious on how they're going to do the reveal in that show, because I said, it's super problematic, so I'm just kind of wondering how they're gonna do that. Then the next book Karen McManus published is Two Can Keep a Secret. This one follows Eloise and Malcolm, so that's 2 perspectives. The One of Us Lying has 4 different perspectives, follows all of the 4 kids. This one follows 2. Basically takes place in a small town, and years ago Eloise's aunt got kidnapped in this town and never has been found back, and since then her mom has moved away from the town to never turn back. And now towards the beginning of the book, Eloise's mom's put into rehab, so she and her twin brother have to go live with their grandmother in this small town again. And then 5 years before the start of this book, a prom queen got murdered, and Malcolm's brother, who's the other perspective, Malcolm, his brother got framed for it because the brother was this girl's boyfriend, I believe. And now this year there is this person who seems to be threatening prom again, and it seems another murder is about to happen, and Eloise and Malcolm kind of band together to figure out what actually happened several years ago with Eloise's aunt, as well as 5 years ago with this prom queen, and trying to stop what's gonna happen now. I give this 1 out of 5 stars. It is the second book by Cant McManus I've ever read. The first one being The Cousins. I'll talk about that later. I thought this was a very engaging novel. I had a lot of fun like putting pieces together with our main characters. I really liked how they like but the pieces together like went on a hunt for the clues, like generally went looking for things, following different leads, and I loved just putting things together with them. I also just really like the characters in general. I thought they were a lot of fun to follow. There was a romance in here between Malcolm and Eloise, and I just feel like that one felt very meh and could have been developed a lot better. Like, here's the thing, I don't need a romance in my book. I don't mind. Even though I love romances, I don't need one in a book. I'd rather have a book without a romance than a book with a poorly developed romance, and this one definitely was one that had a poorly developed romance, so I wasn't a big fan of that. I did really love the small town setting. I thought that was really well done, and I could feel very engaged in the setting, and I feel the atmosphere of it, and I really like that. Also, I thought the ending to this was fantastic. Like, generally like has like these reveals after each other where you can see like puzzle pieces click together and everything works, and then kind of like towards the end just like still like this one big question. And I spent like I first was like, oh well, this book isn't great because, you know, we're already like wrapping things up and like we don't know anything about this question. And then on like the very last page we get the reveal for that one question. I'm like, oh my fucking god. And it was done so well, and I really like that. Generally just like made me shut the book and just like stare at the wall for a little bit because I just had to process what just happened, and I really liked how that was done. Then moving on, the next book Cant McManus published is One of Us Is Next, which is the sequel to One of Us Is Lying. And in this one, basically Simon, who is the guy that died in book 1, now it's kind of like this big following because people at the school kind of miss this whole like gossip block thing, even though at the time they despised it. Now they're like, nothing interesting is going on anymore. And someone anonymous starts a truth or dare game at the school through like texting, and basically you get a text like truth or dare, and if you don't answer, you like one of your darkest secrets get revealed. Same with if you pick truth, and if you pick dare but like you don't accomplish it, the same thing happens. So basically it's like do this dare or one of your darkest secrets gets revealed. That's the whole point of it. And we follow a different set of characters in this book, and we do see the original cast of characters in this as well, but it does mainly focus on different characters. Yeah, I really like this book. I like this a lot more than One of Us Is Lying because this got rid of like a lot of problematic elements. The characters didn't really feel like stereotypes, and I really loved them and I love following them. It has another shit romance, but we'll go back to that. That's a common theme. And I really loved the true detective aspect. I thought it was really interesting. And I also loved how throughout kind of like the book, the dares like increase in intensity a little. Because we still like every dare is like a different person. But I feel like the first dare we see is like very simple, and then we move further and further and like things get more intense. And I really like that. And of course we spent this entire time with three main characters, I believe it's three, trying to figure out who's behind this truth or dare game and what's going on. And I really liked how that mystery was done. I thought there were some amazing plot twists in this book. It just that this one also, just like To Keep a Secret, this one had like a big plot twist in like the final page, but I feel like this one didn't make sense and it wasn't enough, because I feel like in Two Can Keep a Secret it was like this one big question that's still looming over us, and then at a big reveal was the answer to that question. Well, in this book the big reveal is just like something completely random out of nowhere, and it is like, oh, you thought this was happening? Well, turns out this is happening actually. And it doesn't really give an explanation as to how that was possible or what this means or the consequences of it, and I didn't like it, which is kind of what kept this from being my favorite Cant McManus book. It was so easily going up there because I love these characters so much, and I thought the truth of their aspect was very interesting. I love the game aspect, but that just halted it. Still a 4 out of 5 stars. My rating didn't change because of it, but it did drop down like my overall ranking, which I won't share with you because I feel like it's a bit too difficult to rank all of these because they're all so different, but it could have been at the top, but it's not. So let's talk about the one that is actually at the top, and that's The Cousins. This one follows Millie, Audrey, and Jonah, who are cousins, and their parents were disinherited by their grandmother without knowing why. They just randomly got a letter in the mail one day saying like, your like you're disappointed, but you know why, and like all of them have been like, what the fuck, we don't. Like they've therefore been estranged with their mother, or the grandmother of the cousins. And at the beginning of the book, all three of the cousins get invited to their grandmother's, like, it's not, the island is not hers, but she owns all the property on the island, so I'm calling it her island. And she owns like this big resort, and their parents like worked at this resort when they were teens, and she's like, hey, come work at this resort, and we can talk and we connect, because I might be mad at your parents, but you're not your parents. And all of the parents like kind of encourage them to go because they want their inheritance back. And yeah, that's the setup for this book. I really love this. Still give it 4 to 5 stars because I did have some issues with it. This is the first Cant McManus book I read, and it's also my favorite. So I haven't. It's not really that I think this is my favorite because it's the first one that I read, but yeah, it still happened. I just had a lot of fun reading this book, and I feel like this is kind of where my recent interest in mysteries and thrillers came from, because I always thought that genre just like wasn't for me. I've read quite a couple of thrillers and mysteries, and just wasn't a big fan of them. And then I just like took a leap, because I'm a hype person and I've seen so much hype at Cant McManus. So I just like took a leap of faith and read one of the books. And I ended up being this one first because it just sounded the most interesting to me, because I love a dysfunctional family. We all know that. And reading this book, I fell in love with just like theorizing and like seeing different puzzle pieces fall together. And I feel like this book just like did that really well. I thought it was very cleverly crafted. There's a lot of things, like small things that like you mentioned in the beginning, and like, okay, like what's the point of this? And then as reveals are happening, like they end up being like a super big deal. And I really like how that was done. I loved the characters and like the different family dynamics. I thought that was so well done, because like I said, I love a dysfunctional family. I think this did that really well, and the characters were also just like very interesting. And we also got a couple of chapters in the past to kind of like show the build up as towards like why the parents were talented. I really liked that aspect to it as well. I thought that was very interesting, and I liked kind of how that paralleled what we were learning in the present storyline as well. Really like that. Again, I think this did a great job at the setting. Just like to keep a secret, which is a small town, this is an island setting, so there is a difference, but it's not that big. And I feel like Cant McManus did a great job at just like pulling me into the setting and not letting me go, and I really like that. And yeah, it's just not a 5 star for me, because I didn't have this like, oh my god, I'm in love, I'm obsessed feeling with this, because I don't think I would probably ever reread this book, but I still had an amazing time reading it. And this is probably the one I recommend the most out of all of them. But of course, like depending on what sounds the most interesting to you, that's what you should pick up. Then lastly, we have You'll Be the Death of Me, which is her 2021 release. It came out like the last day of November, so it took me a little to read. It's the only one I own physically. The other ones I read from the library. This one follows Ivy, Mateo, and Cal, who used to be best friends in middle school after they kind of like randomly ditched school one day. But once high school started, their friendship kind of like fizzled away, and now they aren't as close. But towards the beginning of this book, like all three of them just are having a rough time with life, and they just happen to call each other and are like, hey, how about we ditch one last time? Like, it's a senior year, it's almost done. Let's just like ditch like we did like all those years ago. And they come across this other guy from school who also ditched class, and they end up at the scene of his death right before the police show up, so they have to like run away. As you know, they don't want to incriminate themselves, because turns out that all three do have a connection to this guy and could potentially have something to do with the murder of this guy. I gave it 2 to 5 stars. This and One of the Slide is the only one that didn't get 4 stars for me for Cant McManus, because this was kind of disappointing to me. And I don't know if that's because I hyped this book up so much because I loved all of other books, or if I genuinely just didn't really like it as much as other ones, which makes sense. That happens too. I just wasn't a big fan of the way the mystery was resolved. You might have heard me talk about this with other reviews, is that I love the moments where all the puzzle pieces fall together. That's just something I adore, and I feel like that wasn't really a big big part in this book. I just feel like we stumbled upon clues, like our characters, like they did actively try to look for leads and stuff, but I feel like every time they kind of find on the one path and then just like kind of accidentally stumble upon the right one. And that just kind of frustrated me, because I really like the cleverness of the characters in Cant McManus's books. And I was missing that from this one a little bit because, like I said, you just stumble upon things instead of like actively figure things out. I just feel like the reveals aren't as satisfactory as I would like because I didn't have that falling off puzzle pieces thing. Still think they're great shocking twists and they're not bad twists, but I just, when it happened, I was like, oh, but it didn't have that moment like, oh, that makes sense now, which I usually have with these books, which is why I like mysteries. I like being able to figure things out, or even when I don't figure things out, to like when the reveal is made, to be able to look back and think like, oh, yeah, no, this makes sense. I didn't really have that with this one, but again, it didn't really feel like it was a twist that came completely out of nowhere. I don't know if that makes sense. Also, this book also focuses a lot on like the drugs environment with like drugs dealers and like people who take drugs and stuff like that. And I feel like it did have some interesting discussions around that, and I really like that aspect of it as well. I also like the characters. I might say they're not as smart, I guess, as other characters and other books that I prefer, but I still think they were great characters to follow, and I thought they were very interesting. Like I said, they in the synopsis, they're all kind of at this like rough part in their life, and I really liked seeing them all like kind of work through that or like work with that. I thought that was very interesting, and yeah, that's my thoughts on this book. It's not perfect, but it's also not terrible. Let me give you a quick overall thoughts on those books because I said a lot. Karen McManus's books are quick and entertaining reads. Every single book that I read by her flew by, and I had so much fun reading. I also have very gripping mysteries. Like, I genuinely wanted to cover what happens next, and besides this one, all of them have very smart characters that are great at figuring out the mysteries and like generally actively look for clues and look for different leads, even if things might get a little bit dangerous. And there's a lot of small details that later become important, which I mentioned in my The Cousins review as well, but almost every single book of hers has that, where just like these small details that seem unimportant, like all of a sudden become like super important in like figuring out what things are, and I really love that. But she should have write a romance. It's like every single book that I talked about on this list has a romance, and none of them is well done. None of them are well developed. None of them have chemistry. I don't like it. I know a lot of people go wild for the romance and one of us is lying. I still think it's terrible. I think it's the best one that she has, yes, but it's still not great. And like I said before, I prefer a book without a romance than one with a poorly developed romance, even though I love romances. She has 2 upcoming books on her Goodreads, so let me talk to you about them. The first one is set to be released August 30th in 2022, which is Nothing More to Tell. This one also has a cover and a synopsis, which I'll read for you because this one sounds really interesting to me. Be sure to keep your friends close and your secrets closer. 4 years ago, Bryn left St. Ambrose School following a shocking murder of her favorite teacher. A story that made headlines after the teacher's body was found by 3 St. Ambrose students in the woods behind her school. The case was never solved. Now that Bryn is moving home and starting her dream internship at a true crime show, she's determined to find out what really happened. The kids who found Mr. Larkin are her way in, and her ex-best friend Trip Talbot was one of them. Without his account of events, the other 2 kids might have gone down for Mr. Larkin's murder. They've never forgotten what Trip did for them that day, just like he hasn't forgotten that everything he told the police was a lie. Digging into the past is bound to shake up the present, and as Bryn begins to investigate what happened in the woods that day, she begins to uncover secrets that might change everything about St. Ambrose, about Mr. Larkin, and about her ex-best friend Trip Talbot. 4 years ago, someone got away with murder. The most terrifying part is that they never left. That synopsis sounds so cool to me. Honestly, the thing that drew me into this book originally was the fact that she was like working for a true crime show podcast. What was it? I already forgot. I have a shit memory. Yeah, a true crime show. She's working for a true crime show. That's the thing that made me most interested in this book initially. Besides the fact that it's already by Karen McManus, which already makes me very hyped for it. But just like the whole synopsis of it just sounds so good. I love like the very academic setting that this is gonna have, presumably. Yeah, I'm incredibly excited for this book. And also we have One of Us is Back, which is going to be the 3rd book in the One of Us Science series, and it's set to come out in 2023. More information isn't known about it yet, but I definitely recommend following Karen McManus on her social media because she does tease her books a lot. Like a couple of weeks ago, we got like a small snippet of One of Us is Back on Instagram, so it's definitely something I recommend go checking out if you're interested in whatever she's coming out with next. And yeah, that was my guide to Karen McManus. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know when it comes to what you thought of these books. If you've read them, you can go into spoilery detail, but leave like a spoiler warning at the top of your comments, so people who haven't read that book yet and are still watching this video, because it is spoiler free, know not to read your comments. And yeah, that was it for today, and I guess I'll see you guys next time. Good.
Here I am again, the same old situation. Why does the God thing have to be so complicated? Should have